Sup, bozos? Welcome back to Office Hours with the Professor, the show where I say things. This episode is about something we've already talked about a little bit, but really deserves its own video. That is the mandate of heaven. So, let's get started. So, the year is 1046 BC. The corrupt Shang dynasty has fallen, and a new dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, has come and taken its place. Okay? The bloodthirsty Shang dynasty's victims could finally rest in peace. But not everyone was happy with this new management. There were still a few Shang loyalists hanging around, and my guess is that these loyalists were probably guests at some point had been guests of the last Shang king's epic pool parties. More on that in the last video. And they weren't too thrilled about this new dynasty, okay? And these Shang supporters said, well, you know, the Shang are ordained by heaven itself to rule. And you Zhou guys have no right to overthrow them and no right to drain the beer pool. At least keep the beer pool. So that's when the Zhou king's brother, the Duke of Zhou, stepped up to the mic. So remember, we have the two main Zhou players are King Wu of Zhou, all right, and he's the king. And then we have the king's brother, the Duke of Zhou. The Duke of Zhou, or since he's such a cool guy, as I like to call him, the Duke of Bro. Okay? The Duke of Bro. And that's when the Duke of Bro stepped up to the mic. And now, the Duke of Zhou, or Bro, is not to be confused with his brother, King Wu of Zhou, or with King Zhou of Shang, who was the evil king that they had just overthrown. Okay, so make sure that we have a distinction between King Wu of Zhou, the Duke of Zhou, and King Zhou of Shang, who has just been overthrown. They are not the same guy. Make sure that we don't confuse them, because I know that these names are confusing. So sorry about that, but that's also the nature of the Chinese language. There's a lot of homophones. So at any rate, the Duke of Bro defended his brother's rule, okay, by saying that he elaborated this doctrine that would shape the next 3,000 years of Asian history. The mandate of heaven, all right? And this is this very important doctrine. Now, what was the mandate of heaven? Basically, the Duke of Bro argued that through its excesses and depravity, the Shang dynasty had lost heavenly favor. And with heavenly favor, they lost the right to rule. Okay? And that the Zhou had the heavenly right to rule, nay, the command to rule, had passed on to the next qualified candidate, that is the House of Zhou. Okay? So this was, and the Zhou, the Duke claimed, had simply carried out heaven's will in supplanting the Shang. Let's do this. There we go. In supplanting the Shang, they had simply carried out heaven's will, just as, 500 years earlier, the Shang dynasty had supplanted the Xia, or that is the previous dynasty. Now, the mandate remained in effect, claimed the Duke. The mandate remained in effect only so long as the ruling dynasty governed responsibly. Every dynasty eventually would grow corrupt, wane, and be replaced. So the Zhou dynasty, this particular dynasty, the Zhou, would continue for 800 years. And this is the longest time in power of any dynasty in Chinese history. So, granted, during the later part of the dynasty, the kings were not nearly as powerful as they had been, but they were still in some capacity ruling. Okay, so if we take a look here, we have the Zhou at the beginning of the dynasty and Zhou at the end of the dynasty.
From the depths of the sea, back to the block, Snoop Doggy Dogg, funky at the dock. Went solo on their ass, but it's still the same. Long Beach is the spot where I serve my cane. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, but don't lose your grip. 9 trizzies, the years there for me to fuck up shit. So I ain't holding nothing back, and motherfucker, I got 5 on the 20 sack.
So you can see it's not quite the same situation, but they were ruling in some capacity. Okay, and when the Zhou dynasty finally did fall in the 3rd century BC, when the Zhou dynasty did fall in the 3rd century BC, it was to this mighty warlord who emphasized his heavenly legitimacy by taking for himself a new title. That title was this: Di, meaning emperor. Now, when we talk about this guy in the 3rd century BC calling himself Di, right, we don't mean to say that he was the first guy to rule a Chinese state, but we do say that this guy was the first one to historically call himself emperor. So let's talk about this guy who overthrew the Zhou, okay? So remember, 3rd century BC, okay? And we have this guy named Qin Shi Huang. All right, and this Qin Shi Huang guy is an absolute psychopath. He's this brutal and ruthless warlord who basically conquers all of his enemies and then sets up this personality cult and a short-lived, a repressive but short-lived dynasty that is later known as the Qin Dynasty. Okay, now this Qin Shi Huang guy, he was so full of himself that he decided to start calling himself not Qin Shi Huang Wang, as previous kings have done. Wang is the word for king. He did not call himself Wang. He called himself Di. Okay, and Di is like a position even higher than that of a king. The Di is the emperor. Okay, so when we say the first emperor of China, this is what we're talking about. Not to say that Chinese rulers had not existed before, but this was the first one historically to call himself an emperor. Now, why didn't the other rulers call themselves emperors? Well, it was a title, this Di was a title previously used only to refer to these legendary pre-Xia dynasty rulers of the distant past. And so the title Di was issued by the, it was avoided, let's say that, it was avoided by the Xia dynasty, by the Shang dynasty, and by the Zhou dynasty. Okay, the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasty preferred to call themselves the more humble Wang, meaning king. Okay, so this new emperor, this new Di, Qin Shi Huang Di, having overthrown the Zhou dynasty, set up a powerful, as I say, but short-lived dynasty that was later known to history as the Qin dynasty. In this name, some scholars argue that this Qin entered Latin, the Latin language, by way of Persian as the word sine, okay? And from this word sine, we have later anglicized the word China. So there's a lot of people out there who think that this is actually the etymology of the word China, which is pretty cool. So that's it. That's my series on the origins of Chinese civilization. That's the story of how China became a thing, how China got started. Let me know what you think, or if you feel like I left out anything important, let me know about that. So everybody take care, and see you next time. Bye, guys.
Stopping, hopping like a rabbit. When I take the Nina Ross, you know I got to have it. I lay back in the cut, retain myself. Think about the shit and I think it well. How can I mix my grip? And how should I make that nigga straight slip? Set trip, gotta get him for his grip as I dip around the corner. Now I'm on another mission.